Welcome to our third and final video for the 7-2 video series. In this example, we are going to look at graphing an exponential that has undergone a few more transformations than the graphs we've looked at in the first two examples. So we're going to look at y equals -2 times 1.5 raised to the x power plus 3. You can see we have a few different transformations that have been placed upon this exponential function. We multiply by a negative, which is going to reflect it over the x-axis. We're multiplying it by a value that is greater than 1, so we're going to have a vertical stretch. And we're also going to be adding 3 at the end of the function, which is going to shift the function up 3 spaces. So, we're going to go ahead and start out with some values again. Again, I usually just start out with that -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And again, you may need to add in some other values to help you really get a good idea of where you're needing to graph. But let's start out with these. So I will start out by plugging in -2. So I would do -2 times 1.5 raised to the -2 power plus 3. Now, when our equations get this complicated, what I would recommend for you guys to use is to go ahead and plug these directly into your calculator. As long as you're plugging in exactly as it looks in here, your calculator will follow the right order of operations to go ahead and spit out the correct y value for you. Just a couple things to note. Make sure around that value that is your base that you are putting in parentheses. And then make sure when you're typing in your exponent, if there's anything after the exponent, that you tap the arrow button until you get off of the exponent so that you're adding the plus 3 at the regular level. So if I plug -2 into my calculator, I would get about 2.11. I would want to go ahead and do that with the rest of my values. I would plug in -1, and that is going to give me, when I type it into my calculator, 1.67. When I plug in 0, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to rely on my calculator again, and I am going to get that when I plug in 0, that is going to give me 1. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to plug in my positive 1. So y equals -2 times 1.5 raised to the first power plus 3. And that is going to give me 0. Then I will plug in my next value. Y equals -2 times 1.5 raised to the second power this time plus 3. And that is going to give me -1.5. So what I'm going to do now is to go ahead and plot these points. So I had -2 and 2.11. 2.11 is going to be just a tad above my 2 value there. I'm going to have -1 and 1.67. So I go to the left 1. And then 1.67 would be about 2/3 of the way between 1 and 2. So I'm going to put a dot right there. My next point is 0, 1. And then I had, 0, 1. Then I had 1, 0. And then I had 2 and -1.5, which would be about right here. Now, this doesn't really give me quite a clear outline for where I'm going to want to draw my curve. So what I'm going to have to do is to go ahead and plug in some more values into my chart so that I can have a little bit better idea of where this graph is going. So I'm going to start just by going on either side of what I've already plugged in. I'm going to plug in a -3, since that is going to be what would be up here, and I'm going to plug in a +3 to continue the chart going the other direction. So if I plugged in -3, I would follow the exact same process. I would go ahead and I would type this into my calculator. And when I plug it into my calculator, I'm going to find that I'm going to get 2.41. So if I go ahead and add this onto my graph, I would go left -3, and up just a little shy of halfway between 2 and 3. And that's going to show me that my curve is going to start leveling out here. I still want just a slightly better idea, so I am going to go ahead and still plug in the +3 to give me another point on the other side. So I will plug in that positive 3 into the same equation I've been using. I'm going to go ahead and type it into my calculator again, and I'm going to find that that's going to give me negative 3.75. So I graphed this point on the graph as well. I have an x value of positive 3 and a y value of negative 3.75, so that should be down between negative 3 and negative 4, probably a little bit closer to negative 4. And you can see that I'm really starting to get a lot more of that curve shape now that I have a few more points to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and connect this line. So our basic starting guidelines is that we do use 5 points, but as you can see from this example, sometimes you are going to need to plug in a few more points to get an idea of where the rest of your equation and graph is going to be. Alright, so we now have this graph. We want to go ahead and add in the asymptote. We are adding 3 at the end, so that means that the asymptote line is going to be y equals 3. So we'll put in that dashed line going across there. And that does answer our first question on our characteristics. Our asymptote is going to be y equals 3. We do finally have an x-intercept this time. We are going to have this exponential going through the x-axis. And at that point where it's going through is going to be 1, 0. So our x-intercept is 1, 0. We have a y-intercept. Our x value was 0. Our y-intercept then is going to be 0, 1. So our y-intercept is 0, 1. That's where it crosses the y-axis. Our domain, since we have no restrictions, is still going to be all real numbers. Our range is based on our asymptote. This time we want all the values that are below our asymptote. So our range is going to be y is less than 3. We're asked again whether it's increasing or decreasing. Remember, this is always going from left to right. So as we go from left to right, we see that we are going downhill. So this is going to be decreasing. Interval of positive and interval negative. Since we do have the case where it's crossing the x-axis this time, and part of my cough, we do see that it's going across this x-axis. It is going to switch at that x-intercept that we talked about earlier. It's going to be positive when it's above and negative when it's below. So it starts out being positive. Our interval of positive is going to be starting at negative infinity, because that's where we're starting out. And it's going to stay positive until we get to that x-intercept. That x-intercept is going to be 1. So our value is from negative infinity to positive 1. At that point, it then switches to be negative. So our interval of negative is going to start at 1. It's that same x-intercept. And it's going to be negative for the remainder of the graph. So this time, it's going to start at 1 and never stop. So it would be between 1 and positive infinity. The next thing we have is the rate of change over the interval from 0 to 2. So we need ordered pairs with an x value of 0 and an x value of 2. We did find both of these when we were graphing. 0, 1 was the one ordered pair we had. 2, negative 1.5 was our other. So I'm going to do negative 1.5 minus 1 over 2 minus 0. So that's going to give me negative 2.5 over a positive 2. So if I were to divide that out, that would give me negative 1.75. And I'm going to put that, actually that's not negative 1.75, sorry. Let me correct that. Negative 2 divided by 2 is actually negative 1.25, not negative 1.75. Alright, so that is our rate of change, negative 1.25. And that leaves us with just our end behavior now. So as x moves towards negative infinity, that's to the left. That is when we are approaching our asymptote, so our y would be 3. And then as x approaches infinity, as it moves to the right, it is going to be going down forever, so that is going to be negative infinity. Alright, we do finally have a you-try video for you guys, or a you-try problem rather, for you guys to go ahead and attempt. Go ahead, try this, make sure that you check your answer, and then go ahead and give the practice a try. Alright, that wraps things up for 7-2. We'll see you in the next series.